The HOA pounded on my door, cops in tow, ready to drag me out over a single violation that wasn't even in their rulebook. My heart raced as their demands grew louder, accusing me of defying the neighborhood's perfect image. But when my wife stepped out, badge gleaming on her uniform, their faces turned to stone. What secret did she hold that silenced them all? How could one moment flip their power trip into chaos? Stick around, because this HOA nightmare spirals into a showdown you want to believe, where petty rules meet a jaw-dropping twist. The sun dipped low over Willow Creek, a tidy suburban enclave where every lawn was clipped to perfection and every mailbox matched. My name's Tom, a mechanic who spent years fixing cars to save for our dream home, a modest two-story with a small garden my wife, Sarah, loved tending. We'd moved here for peace, a place to raise our two kids, away from the city's noise. Neighbors waved, kids biked down quiet streets, and the community felt like a fresh start. Sarah, a police sergeant, worked long shifts but always made time to plant roses by our porch, her way of unwinding. Life felt steady, predictable, almost too good to be true. Willow Creek's HOA kept things pristine, their rules pinned to every fridge. No loud music, no unapproved paint colors, no stepping out of line. At first, their newsletters and friendly reminders seemed harmless, just part of the package for a polished neighborhood. I'd nod at the HOA president, Karen, a woman with a clipboard always in hand, her smile sharp as a tack. She'd stop by, complimenting Sarah's roses but eyeing our old pickup truck like it offended her. I shrugged it off, small price for the quiet life we wanted. But something about Karen's gaze lingered, like she was waiting for a slip-up. Little did I know that a single choice about our home was about to unravel everything, turning our sanctuary into a battleground. The first letter arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning, slipped under our door like an unwelcome guest. Its bold red letters screamed, "Notice of violation," from the Willow Creek HOA. I squinted at the fine print. Our pickup truck, parked in our own driveway, was deemed unsightly and violated some obscure rule about commercial vehicles. Sarah and I exchanged looks. My truck was old, sure, but it was our lifeline for hauling tools and kid gear. Pay a $200 fine or move it within 48 hours, the letter demanded. I crumpled it, figuring it was a mistake. Karen wasn't the type to let mistakes slide, though. By Thursday, a second letter appeared, this time with a $500 fine and a threat to tow my truck. I called the HOA office, expecting a quick fix, but Karen's voice was ice-cold through the phone. "Rules are rules, Tom," she said, her tone dripping with authority. I tried explaining the truck's necessity, my job, our family's needs, but she cut me off, citing bylaws I'd never seen. Frustration churned in my gut. Sarah, fresh off a 12-hour shift, read the letter and shook her head. "They're picking a fight," she muttered, her cop instincts kicking in. We parked the truck in the garage, thinking that'd end it. It didn't. The next week, Karen and her clipboard brigade started circling. They'd show up unannounced, peering over our fence, scribbling notes about Sarah's rosebushes being too tall, or our kids' soccer ball straying onto the lawn. A new violation notice hit our mailbox, $100 for excessive garden overgrowth. Sarah's roses, her pride and joy, were barely 2 feet high. I stormed to the next HOA meeting, held in the community center's sterile conference room, where Karen sat at the head like a queen on a throne. Neighbors fidgeted, avoiding my gaze. I held up the notice, voice steady but burning. "This is harassment," I said. Karen's smile didn't waver. "We're protecting property values, Tom. You'll thank us later." The fines kept coming, each one steeper, each rule pettier. $150 for a non-compliant mailbox color. Ours was navy, not the approved slate blue. $300 for unauthorized Halloween decorations after our kids hung a ghost made of bedsheets. Our savings dwindled, eaten by penalties we couldn't fight without a lawyer we couldn't afford. Sarah started researching HOA laws at night, her laptop glowing as she scoured legal forums. "There's got to be a loophole," she'd say, her voice a mix of exhaustion and defiance. I felt helpless, watching our dream home turn into a trap. Neighbors whispered, some sympathetic, others smug, but none dared cross Karen. She'd built an empire of fear, her clipboard a scepter. Then came the landscaping incident. Karen's crew showed up one morning, claiming our front yard needed corrective maintenance, to meet HOA standards. Without warning, they ripped out half of Sarah's roses, leaving jagged stumps in the dirt. I came home to find Sarah staring at the wreckage, her hands trembling. "They didn't even knock," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Something snapped in me. I marched to Karen's house, 2 streets over, where her pristine lawn mocked our chaos. She answered the door, unfazed. "You're escalating this unnecessarily," she said, as if I were the problem. I walked away, fists clenched, knowing compliance wasn't an option anymore. The HOA's next move was bolder. A certified letter arrived, citing repeated noncompliance and threatening a lien on our house. A lien. The word hit like a punch. Lose our home over a truck and some roses? Sarah's cop training kept her calm, but I saw the fire in her eyes. She started documenting everything. Photos of the notices, timestamps of Karen's visits, even recordings of her snide comments during chance encounters. "We're building a case," Sarah said, her voice steady but fierce. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Could we really fight a machine like this? Tension spiked at the annual HOA board election. Karen was up for re-election, her campaign built on maintaining Willow Creek's excellence. I considered running against her, but whispers from neighbors warned me off. Karen had dirt on everyone, they said. Still, I stood up at the meeting, voice shaking, and read a list of our fines, each one more absurd than the last. A few neighbors nodded, but Karen's allies shut me down, calling my complaints disruptive. As I left, Karen leaned close, her voice low. "You're making enemies, Tom. Think about your family." The threat hung heavy, chilling me more than the fines. Then, the cops showed up. It was a quiet Saturday, kids playing in the backyard, when 2 officers knocked, their faces stern. Karen stood behind them, arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with victory. They handed me a citation, claiming our ongoing violations warranted police involvement. My stomach dropped. Sarah wasn't home. She was on duty, patrolling across town. I tried explaining, but the officers were unmoved, their orders clear. "Comply or face consequences," one said, echoing Karen's mantra. As they turned to leave, I heard Sarah's cruiser pull into the driveway. Her boots hit the pavement, and I caught a glimpse of her uniform, badge shining under the sun. Karen's smirk faltered, just for a second. What was about to unfold would turn this petty power play into something none of us expected. The air thickened with tension as the 2 officers stood on our porch, their badges catching the afternoon light, Karen hovering behind them like a shadow eager for the kill. My pulse hammered in my ears, the citation paper crumpling in my fist. The kids peeked from the window, wide-eyed, sensing the storm brewing. Sarah stepped out, her uniform crisp, boots firm on the concrete, the weight of her badge pulling all eyes toward her. The officers straightened instinctively, their authoritative stances faltering as recognition dawned. Karen's triumphant smirk froze mid-curl, her clipboard slipping slightly in her grip. Sarah approached with measured steps, her gaze locking onto the scene like a predator assessing prey. The lead officer, a burly man with a mustache that twitched nervously, cleared his throat, but no words came. His partner, younger and less seasoned, shifted his weight, eyes darting between Sarah and the ground. They knew her. Everyone in the precinct did. As a sergeant with years on the force, Sarah commanded respect, her reputation for fairness and unyielding justice preceding her. But this wasn't just about rank. It was personal now, our home invaded by the very system she upheld. I watched as Sarah's expression hardened, a storm brewing behind her calm facade. She scanned the citation, her fingers tracing the words that branded us as neighborhood outcasts. Karen stepped forward, attempting to reclaim control, her voice sharp but betraying a quiver. The officers exchanged glances, the younger one murmuring something under his breath. Sarah's presence alone shifted the power dynamic, turning Karen's orchestrated ambush into a precarious standoff. My frustration boiled over into a surge of hope. Maybe this was the break we needed. Without a word exchanged, Sarah motioned for the officers to step aside, her authority unspoken yet absolute. They complied, retreating to the edge of the porch as if pulled by an invisible force. Karen's face paled, her eyes narrowing in defiance, but the clipboard trembled in her hands. Sarah turned her attention to the HOA president, the woman who'd turned our lives into a nightmare of fines and threats. In that moment, the petty tyrant who'd ripped out roses and summoned cops looked small, exposed under the weight of scrutiny. The confrontation ignited like a spark on dry tinder. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling through the evidence we'd compiled: photos of destroyed gardens, stacks of unjust fines, timestamps of harassment. But she had more. During her late-night research, she'd uncovered irregularities in the HOA's financials, whispers from anonymous tips that pointed to embezzlement. Karen had been skimming funds, using HOA dues for personal luxuries while enforcing rules that benefited her alone. Sarah had connected the dots, her cop instincts leading her to public records that showed discrepancies in the community's accounts. The lien threat? A bluff to cover her tracks. As Sarah laid it out silently through gestures and shared documents on her screen, the officer's expressions darkened. The lead officer nodded slowly, piecing together the implications. Karen's empire of control began to crumble right there on our doorstep. She backed away, her face flushing with a mix of rage and fear, but Sarah advanced, her stance unyielding. The younger officer reached for his radio, the crackle of static breaking the heavy air, signaling backup or perhaps an escalation that favored us for once. My heart raced with a cocktail of emotions: anger at the months of torment, vindication swelling as the truth emerged, and a fierce pride in Sarah's resolve. The kids watched from inside, their innocent world threatened by this absurdity, fueling my determination. Karen lashed out in her mind, but her body language screamed defeat. She clutched her clipboard like a shield, eyes darting for an escape. The officers, now fully apprised, turned their gaze on her, the roles reversing in an instant. What had started as a routine enforcement call morphed into a potential arrest scene. The peak hit when Sarah revealed the smoking gun, a forged document in the HOA's violation notices, bearing Karen's signature but dated before the rules were even voted on. It was fraud, plain and simple, a legal bombshell that exploded the foundation of Karen's authority. The officers' hands moved to their belts, ready for action, as Karen's composure shattered. She stumbled back, nearly tripping on the porch steps, her reign of petty terror facing its end. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the cruiser's lights and the unfolding drama, their whispers a chorus of long-suppressed grievances. In that charged moment, frustration peaked into raw anger, then surged toward triumph. Sarah stood tall, her uniform a symbol of justice reclaiming the narrative. I felt the weight lift from my shoulders, the helplessness of weeks replaced by a burning sense of rightness. The cops, once tools in Karen's game, now froze in realization of the bigger picture. They'd been manipulated, drawn into a web of abuse. Karen's eyes met mine, pleading silently for mercy she hadn't shown us. But the tide had turned irreversibly. The standoff stretched, every second amplifying the emotional intensity. Sarah's hand rested on her badge, a quiet reminder of the oath she lived by, now wielded against the very pettiness that plagued our community. The lead officer stepped toward Karen, his posture shifting from enforcer to investigator. Her clipboard dropped to the ground, papers scattering like confessions in the wind. The younger officer secured the area, his earlier nervousness replaced by professional resolve. Our front yard became the arena for this climax, the absurdity of HOA power plays exposed under the harsh light of accountability. As the reality sank in, Karen's facade cracked wide open. She collapsed onto the steps, the fight draining from her, while Sarah remained composed, orchestrating the fallout with precision. The neighbors' murmurs grew louder, some nodding in solidarity, others shocked by the revelations. My anger transformed into a cathartic release, vindication washing over me like a wave. This wasn't just our victory. It was a blow against every overreaching HOA that bullied families into submission. The dust settled slowly on that fateful Saturday, the cruiser's lights casting flickering shadows across our yard as neighbors clustered in hushed groups. Karen sat on the porch steps, her once imposing figure diminished, hands cuffed behind her back by the very officers she'd summoned to intimidate us. The lead officer read her rights in a steady monotone, the words echoing like a long-overdue verdict. Sarah stood nearby, her uniform a beacon of calm amid the chaos, her expression a blend of professional detachment and quiet satisfaction. I'd never felt such a rush of relief, the months of pent-up frustration evaporating as the reality sank in. The tyrant had fallen. As the police escorted Karen to their car, her clipboard lay abandoned on the ground, its pages fluttering in the breeze like scattered remnants of her crumbling empire. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who suffered in silence, now voicing their own stories of unfair fines and veiled threats. One elderly couple mentioned a $400 penalty for a bird feeder deemed unattractive, and another family recounted how Karen had blocked their fence permit over a personal grudge. The revelations poured out, a dam breaking after years of repression. Sarah's evidence, meticulously gathered, had not only exposed Karen's embezzlement but ignited a community reckoning. By evening, the story spread like wildfire through Willow Creek's group chats and front porch conversations. The HOA board, panicked by the scandal, called an emergency meeting that night in the community center. I attended, Sarah by my side, her presence a silent shield against any lingering resistance. The remaining board members, faces pale and voices subdued, voted unanimously to dissolve all pending fines against us and others similarly targeted. Our lien threat vanished, erased as if it had never existed. More importantly, they initiated an audit of the HOA's finances, uncovering thousands in misappropriated funds, dues siphoned for Karen's luxury vacations and home upgrades. The board pledged transparency, promising to revise the bylaws to prevent such abuses in the future. In the days that followed, the consequences unfolded with a satisfying inevitability. Karen faced charges of fraud and embezzlement, her court date set for the following month. Local news picked up the story, dubbing it the HOA horror in Willow Creek, with headlines highlighting the irony of a cop's wife turning the tables. Reporters camped outside our home, but Sarah handled them with grace, emphasizing that this was about justice, not revenge. The publicity drew attention from state lawmakers, sparking discussions on HOA reforms to curb overreach. Petitions circulated, gathering signatures from across the suburb, demanding limits on fines and mandatory oversight for community associations. For our family, the impact was profound and healing. Sarah's roses, though damaged, began to regrow under her careful tending, symbolizing our resilience. The kids, once wary of playing outside for fear of another violation, reclaimed the yard with laughter and games. I parked my truck in the driveway without a second thought, its presence a defiant badge of normalcy. Our savings depleted by the fine started to recover as the HOA refunded not just ours, but all unjust penalties. A small victory fund that we used for a family vacation, the first in years without the shadow of stress looming over us. The community transformed in subtle yet meaningful ways. Neighbors who'd avoided each other now bonded over shared experiences, organizing block parties free from Karen's judgmental gaze. A new HOA president was elected, a retired teacher named Mike, known for his fairness and aversion to petty rules. Under his leadership, the association shifted focus from enforcement to enhancement. Community gardens, repair funds for low-income families, and open forums for resident input. Willow Creek shed its rigid perfection, embracing a more lived-in charm where individuality wasn't a crime. Yet, the long-term ripples extended beyond our streets. Karen's downfall inspired similar uprisings in neighboring HOAs, with residents emboldened to challenge their own despots. Online forums buzzed with tips on documenting abuses and seeking legal aid, turning our ordeal into a blueprint for resistance. Sarah received commendations from her precinct for her off-duty detective work, her career bolstered by the exposure. For me, the mechanic who'd once felt powerless, it reignited a sense of agency. I volunteered for the new HOA board, ensuring voices like ours were heard. Emotionally, the journey left scars that faded with time. The frustration and helplessness we'd endured forged a deeper bond in our marriage, Sarah's strength complementing my quiet determination. We talked late into the night about the absurdity of it all, how a truck and some roses could unravel a web of corruption. The kids learned early lessons in standing up to bullies, their innocence tempered but not broken. Our home, once a battleground, became a true sanctuary again, filled with the simple joys we'd almost lost. As the weeks turned to months, the scandal's echoes lingered, a reminder of how fragile community harmony could be when power went unchecked. Karen's trial brought closure. She pled guilty to reduced charges, avoiding jail, but facing restitution and community service, ironic tasks like maintaining public parks, far from her clipboard throne. Her house sold quickly, The new owners, a young family, oblivious to the history, were planting wildflowers that would have horrified her. Reflecting on it all, the takeaway burned clear. HOAs, meant to foster unity, too often breed division through unchecked authority. Our story wasn't unique, but it highlighted the power of persistence and truth in dismantling petty tyrannies. In a world of rigid rules and faceless enforcers, one person's stand can ripple into collective change, proving that even the smallest violation can spark the biggest revolution. What if your neighborhood hit a similar shadow? Would you fight back or let the fines pile up? Share your HOA nightmares in the comments. Maybe your story is next.